I'm sure you are loving being in Florida. So, and I'm in Pittsburgh, where we are just blustery cold. But I am Vaso Ploris. I am the founder and executive director of Lending Hearts, as I've shared in our past grand rounds. But I am so thrilled today to share our guest speaker, David Richman. I have so much respect and admiration for this amazing man, and I can't wait for all of you to hear him speak today. He is truly inspirational, his stories, his journeys, but the work that he's done in helping people to overcome the stresses, seeking the wellness in their life, I really think plays a perfect part in this Grand Round series. So without further ado, I turn
Who do
it
you
over
want to
to you,
message?
David.
Well, thank you, Vaso. How are you doing today?
To who?
Great.
I don't know what in the world technology is wacky. I'm telling you. I think I'm good now. Are we good? Okay. So, thank you all. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. I really do apologize for that. Everybody's time is important. So, um, I was thinking about this the other day. One of the things that gives me the most joy is to do expressive writing seminars. And I work with organizations. I think Vasu, we did one with your organization as well, where some organization I've been working with for years, and it just reinforces to me the level of depth of the traumas that people carry around with them, and how that affects their ability or inability to deal with the emotional side of whatever medical issues that they're going through. And it's shocking to me. I'll tell you a little bit of the backstory of what brought me down this path and how it's really helped me. But I'm going to give you the punchline, and the punchline was uh, the latest book that I wrote is called Cycle of Lives. It's the story of I interviewed 15 people over a about a 2 year period, and I went deep into the uh, traumas that had happened in their lives. So point A was like when they encountered cancer, maybe as an eighth grader going to the hospital on a field trip and saying, "Oh my gosh, I got to become a doctor," and not walking through the oncology ward or whatever. Or a parent or a child or a friend encounter cancer. Point A was that point. Point B is today. What I wanted to find out is how were they able to or not able to navigate the emotional side of that A to B journey in relations to all the traumas before that. And the punchline is when one of the first people that reached out to me after I read the book was a gentleman who was a gastroenterology oncologist. I think the way he explained it to me was I deal with everything that's nothing good, nothing good. And I called him because he wrote me a really nice note, and he asked me to call him, and I did. He had retired from being a surgeon, kind of in the middle of his career, and started a foundation. And he said, "I read your book twice," and he said the first time I read it in absolute horror. He said because as a little kid, I all I wanted to do was make people better, and I won't go into why. He goes, but I realized that I spent um, my entire career not knowing what my patients were going through. He said I just couldn't believe what they were bringing to me without me knowing about it, the traumas that they had endured. And he goes, I was in absolute horror about what a terrible doctor I must have been, not listening to them and not hearing them, not asking them the right questions. He goes, the second time I read your book, he goes, I realized, oh my gosh, everybody's going through something. Like, how can we be more compassionate to understand that? And it was such a touching realization from him, because when I spoke to the 15 people that were, one was a really pretty famous oncologist at NYU. Another was a critical care nurse. some were not caregivers. They were people that had gone through or lost people to cancer. That the amount of the traumas that affected their ability or inability to deal with that was just astounding. So a little background on how this happened was um, this interest for me, and I think what I got out of it, what I continue to bring to my practice and to my interactions with people, is that I got a call from my sister one day, married, young kids, very happy, living her best life, and she said, "Geez, I'm gonna die soon. I just got a diagnosis of terminal brain cancer. Like I was getting headaches, and now I'm gonna die." And that was obviously pretty rough for everybody involved. She became this pretty rare type of cancer, so she became a board study at the Johnson Cancer Center at UCLA, which was really a benefit to her, um, and uh, and it prolonged probably her life a little bit, and got her to receive additional care and maybe some access to resources that she might not have gotten had she not been on a board study. But we were fortunate enough to be able to talk about the things that she was going through, and really the once she kind of dealt with how do I get better care and how do my kids get taken care of and how do I talk to my husband about getting therapy, when she was dealing with all of the things that they all deal with, really the trauma boiled down to our childhood was not one that was really great. And she was just, her whole life was driven by giving her kids the kind of experience that she had never had as a kid. And so the only thing that mattered to her in her cancer journey was, the issues around wanting to give her kids as much as she could give them before she left, right? Nothing else mattered. And to know what her traumas were would have allowed people to know how to interact with her better, and um and that dynamic of, why don't people know the things that we've been through was kind of that's sparked an interest in me. And so I went on a quest to find really important and interesting stories. And I cold called Moffitt Cancer Center in Florida. I cold called MD Anderson. I I, uh, I reached out to friends and family and said, "Who do you know that might have an interesting story?" And I finally was introduced to tons and tons of people, and narrowed it down to to just a few that I thought would give us some insight into what are the traumas that people have gone through, and what can we learn from that? Because uh, what I always ran into as somebody who was watching somebody go through, end of life or even just really serious care, was not knowing what to say, and how do we talk to them? Because everybody that I spoke to, whether they ended up in the book or not, um, one of the most common dynamics that they had was that they were abandoned. Um, Even the people that were closest to them, family members, roommates from college, um, they just all disappeared. And if they didn't fully disappeared, they disappeared in some way. And that was the dynamic that was very, very regular amongst everyone. And they didn't know why. Like why they know what I'm going through. Why are they abandoning me? Why am I so lonely? And it's because nobody knows what to say. And so I went out on this book on this book idea and interviewing people so I could maybe have an impact on changing that dynamic of what do we say. And so an example of that is there's a gentleman. All the names in the book are real. The stories are real. The people are real. They don't mind me telling their true stories. Um, Joshua works at Moffitt Cancer Center, and he's a perfect example of how I think he has affected just endless people once they know his story on how to start hard conversations. And I'll tell you specifically his story. So he's a young Latino surfer, pulls a muscle, and it's just not getting better. He pulled a muscle surfing, it's just not getting better. And and I he ends up going to the doctor, and the doctor says, yeah, you didn't pull a muscle. You have a grapefruit size sarcoma in your abdomen, and you're not going to make it. Um, that's a short, very short story of what happened. But when I spoke to him, he was a couple of years outside of nearly 1,000 hours of treatments and in remission and doing well. But when I spoke to him, we went into it with me trying to figure out how do you um, get through the machismo that he had. You know, he wouldn't accept help from anybody. He didn't even want to go to the doctor because it was just a pulled muscle, and he couldn't believe that um, that it was anything worse. And when it was, he just didn't want to accept help because I'm a young Latin male, and that's just the way it goes. And I was just like, nah, I don't believe there's more to the story. I mean, there has to be. And I kind of broke him down to telling me why is it that he feels that he can't accept attention, if he can't accept help, he can't show any weakness. It was because when he was being prepped for the first major surgery, it was a 12-hour surgery, just a zipper down from chest to abdomen, and the start of just a brutal journey. When he was being prepped for surgery, he hadn't told his girlfriend what was going on, really, because he's just too macho. And um, everybody came in telling him, "Hey, this is what we're getting ready to do." And by the way, you know, uh, possible outcome is you might not survive the surgery. And he was glancing over at his girlfriend, going, "Man, I hope that she didn't hear that." Because he was just like, "Yeah, I'm going in for a procedure." He didn't give her any more than that. And about the fifth or sixth person that came in that said that convinced her to stand up, look at him, and go, "Joshua, this is not my life, dude. Sorry, I'm out." And walked out on him during the surgery, or during the pre-surgery time. It was devastating for him, and as you could imagine, he's really now going to be alone going into that thing. But I kept digging, and I kept digging, and I kept digging. Why is it that he wouldn't accept help? That's traumatic, but geez, I mean, it doesn't really explain it. um and he finally closed the door. We were on the phone one day, closed the door. He didn't want his wife, his then wife, to hear what was going on. And he said, "Well, I'm going to talk to you about something I never told anybody in my life." And I said, "Okay." And to make a long story short, when he was 6 years old, he walked in on his mom taking her own life, and left him just absolutely an abandoned little kid. The story gets worse. She had taken him away from his biological father in Puerto Rico. When the biological father found out that she had done that, he came to the States to take him away from who he thought was his father and take him away to Puerto Rico. When I asked somebody like Joshua, "Hey, how are you?" when I knew something was wrong, and they said, "I am fine," or when I said, "Hey, can I help you with something?" and they go, "No, I'm fine. I'm really good." Like before I knew the depth of what maybe that person might have gone through, I might have said, "Oh, well, that's good," because honestly, I don't really want to hear what you're going through anyway, because I don't know what the heck to say to you, right? Thank God you said you're fine, you don't need anything. Um, and they probably don't want me invading their space because they don't want to burden me and guilt me into think. There's all these dynamics, right? I want to exit the conversation as quickly as possible. Um, but it's not because they're fine. It's not because they don't want help. Maybe it is, but I'm telling you, hundreds and hundreds of people have told me that when they know somebody's going through something, based on what they learned from Joshua, is that the answer to the question could be, like, are you telling me that you're okay because you don't want to burden me? Are you telling me you're okay because you think it's difficult for me to help you? Are you are you saying that you don't need help because you don't know how to ask for help? Are you afraid that I'm gonna turn away because I'm not gonna turn away? Like take it another step forward, because it's so hard to ask for help. It's so hard to let people in. It's so hard for anybody to understand what the heck we've all gone through, that it's so much easier to not include them. It's so much easier to not burden them or give them the guilt, or to bring them into our dark world when they're having a great day, or vice versa. Um, and so those are the lessons learned that I think help start these hard conversations of um, how do people better connect with others around the emotional side of what they're going through. And um, it's so hard to do that. It's so much easier to just avoid the hard conversations. I can talk all day long about, do you need a lasagna dropped off, or hey, I know a you know a center that will help you navigate, you know critical care needs or whatever. I can talk all day long, find people all day long that are willing to talk about kind of the things you need to do around the medical issues you're going through, how to get your kids taken care of while you're going to chemo. I can help you with that. But man, when it comes to how are you doing, we are just not well equipped, because uh, it's just so hard to break through. So starting the hard conversations was the motivation for that book. And each story kind of brings up these crazy traumas that we've all gone through. Um, you know, I like to say I don't have anything in common with somebody that, perhaps lost a limb, that maybe, had childhood cancer or whatever. I don't have anything really in common. I don't get that. I don't have in common with that. But you know what I do understand? I do understand things like abuse or addiction or avoidance behavior, or being bullied, or feeling guilty that you were a bully, or all of the traumas that happened in our formative years. I can identify with that. And if I can humble myself enough to know that nobody really knows what I've gone through. I don't know what they've gone through, and if we had any idea, neither one of us would be able to deal with what the other person has just dealt with their whole lives. It gives us a way to better connect. And so, yeah, those are some of my thoughts. That's what the impetus for the book was. Each story is unbelievably fascinating with regards to what people have overcome. And each person that I spoke to was like, I don't understand why we're talking. My story's not that interesting. And so that's the other kind of amazing thing from this, is people are just trying to go through what they go through. All those traumas are just tucked away deep inside, and everybody has them. So I'll stop there. Maybe if anybody wants to throw out some questions, Vaso, if you want to maybe throw out a couple of questions so we know each other a little bit better. If there's anything that I can shine light on.
You mentioned, and I'm sorry, I neglected to do so, that you had done a couple of expressive writing classes with members of Lending Hearts. And I know the feedback from individuals in our group was um, so beneficial and so helpful to them navigating whatever they were dealing with in that particular moment on that evening, or something that had been bothering them for years. But taking that time I recall that you just gave a few prompts, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden everybody just started, they shut off their cameras for a moment and wrote and wrote and wrote. And that opportunity to get whatever it is you're feeling off your chest, just whether you're dealing something or not, but just taking that moment to express yourself with pen and paper or typing it out, whatever that opportunity looks like for you. And I after having gone through that with you and watching everybody and getting their feedback, I started to think, wow, that is just this applies to people dealing with any life. It's
Hmm.
just life. We all have something in our days. So I didn't know if you wanted to share a little bit more about your expressive writing sessions with folks.
Yeah, sure. I would love to. It's really a big passion of mine. I think if we go into the concept of what is the inside voice that we have versus the outside voice, um, I steal this from a therapist friend of mine who says we're all just little kids in big kid bodies using big kid words to impress all the other little kids in big kid bodies. And I thought, man, that's true because we're all just like these little kids inside, right? The voice that we have inside is just so different than our outside voice. And usually the voice inside is really not nice. It's really not nice. Right. And I could give a million examples, but I'll just give a recent one from my life earlier in the year. I'm running. I do like endurance athletics, Ironmans, 100-mile runs, those kind of things. And I'm going for a long run. And I don't know what it is, but dogs love to bite me. Yeah, I don't know if they bite me because I'm afraid of them or if I'm afraid of them because they bite me, but whatever, the dogs love to bite me. And so I'm going for a run and this dog is being walked by his owner and the owner takes the dog, walks across the street or towards the other side of the street. It's a residential area. And I'm thinking, oh, thank goodness, because that's a dog that's going to bite me. Obviously, the owner knows that because the owner's going to move away. And as I start getting closer, the dog turns around. Okay. And he kind of doesn't lunge, but he looks at me like, yeah, you're a dude that loves to get bit. And I think I want to bite you. And so I looked at the dog and I ran around on the other side and I hit the curb of the sidewalk on somebody's driveway and rolled my ankle and broke my foot. Okay. Now, thankfully, I was about a quarter mile from my house. So I literally, I kind of dragged my foot, crawled. I knew it was broken the second I broke it. And that for that quarter mile, the amount of mental like beating up that I did on myself. You're such an effing idiot. Why aren't you looking where you're running? God, oh my God, you're such a oh, this is horrible. Now you just ruined this. And I am literally livid at myself and I am just beating myself up. And I get home and I'm like, dude, you're such a jerk. Because if this had happened to, say, your daughter, or if it happened to a good friend of yours, or some stranger that you didn't even like, and they fell down and broke their foot, would you go up to them and start pointing at them like you're such an idiot? Like, why in the world did you look at that dog? Don't you even know what you're doing? Shouldn't you be looking at your feet? This is entirely your fault. You're such an idiot. Like, there's no way I would talk to anybody else the way I talk to myself. And that's a silly example, but it's a perfect example because those kind of things, especially around, I don't know, an eating disorder, self-image, a peer pressure, you name it, we can beat ourselves up for years, millions and millions and millions of times subconsciously inside our heads. So what I try to do with expressive writing is to say, you know, let's try to change that inside voice. Let's try to change the narrative. And if we can teach people how to use tools to write emotion, write about emotional things, not just, journal, whatever, those, not that there's anything wrong with that, but really explore kind of emotional issues, explore traumas, and sometimes force ourselves to maybe in an expressive writing seminar, write a letter to ourselves, forgiving ourselves for talking so mean, whatever it is. If we can learn how to address the emotional side of the traumas that we've been through in a different voice, a kinder voice, a more understanding voice, a more sympathetic voice, a more empathetic one. If we could do that, then we can change the way that we talk to ourselves. And how great would that be if we could treat ourselves anywhere near as well as we treat strangers, even people we don't like, we treat them better than we treat ourselves. And so with that inside voice. And when I do these expressive writing seminars, also, what is just absolutely mind-boggling and thing that just never stops touching me is when people read out loud what they've written oftentimes it leads to just a flood of emotions, and they're hearing the words that they wanted to hear, even if it's just from themselves. They're hearing the words that understand them, that they're hearing it in a different way. It's absolutely mind-boggling. And so um, uh, it's hard. We're all busy. We all don't take time for ourselves. But I try to implore upon people to start some type of an expressive writing practice, which is really, really simple. I'll go over it super, super quick. It's like, what are you going to write? Oh, I'm going to write an apology letter. I'm going to write a letter to a friend. I'm going to write about a bad day that I had. I'm going to write about my last doctor's appointment. Oh my gosh, one lady, she wrote about a doctor that literally her oncologist brought his medical staff back into the room and asked her to stand up. And then he started berating her in front of his medical staff, saying, this is the kind of patient we don't want. And these are the reasons why. And she was horrified. I mean, literally broke down in tears. She could tell how the staff was uncomfortable. She was like, what the hell did I do? She couldn't believe it. And she went over the thing for months and months and months. And finally, during one of my expressive writing seminars, she said, screw it, I'm going to write the guy a letter. And she wrote this doctor a letter going, like, how dare you? Like all I did was want to ask the question a different way. And maybe I asked it too many times, but I needed help. And blah, blah, blah. Like she wrote this big, long letter. And she was bawling her eyes out reading it out loud. And one of the other people in the group convinced her to send the letter to the doctor. And she rewrote it a couple of times, each time it being even more therapeutic, I guess, more validating that she could stand up for herself, and more inquisitive about why this had happened to her. And strangely enough, she got a letter back from the doctor apologizing to her, saying that he hadn't had a good night's slept asleep since that day, because he had found out some horrible news about his family, and he wasn't able to deal with it. And he took out his anger at that on this poor woman, because she kept asking him questions over and over and over and wanting to know more. And he felt lost and trapped into not getting answers. And she caught him at probably the lowest point in his life at that point. And he has been horrified since that day, the way that he treated her. And I mean, could you imagine the therapy? Could you imagine the therapeutic value of that? Even if she had never sent him the letter, just the work that it did to justify to her, to change the voice. Because of course, for the first few weeks, it was about, why am I such a bad person? Why did I deserve to be yelled at? Why am I so stupid? Why did I put myself in that position? And as we went through the writing, it became more empowering. Like why, why am I going to allow that to be my narrative? And so anyway, I'm kind of rambling on that example, but I think you can all get me that. What are we writing? Who are we writing it to? And why are we uniquely qualified to write it? Those are the three things with expressive writing. What am I writing? A letter about an experience, about a doctor's appointment, about a dead relative who treated me badly. What am I writing about? Who am I writing it to? Am I writing it to me? Am I writing to my little 6-year-old self? Am I writing it to my future self? Am I writing it to my kid who will one day grow up and know? Who am I writing it to? And then why? Why am I uniquely qualified to write it? Because man, nobody knows what you've gone through. No, nobody knows. And if they did, they would be so compassionate to try to tell you that it'll be okay, or that they'll try to understand if they just knew. And nobody knows better than you. So you're uniquely qualified to write about the traumas that you've been through, because they're real, and we need to address them. So anyway, you could tell I'm pretty passionate about the expressive writing seminars, Vasto, and I it really is one of the joys of my life.
No, the sessions were phenomenal. And I always sit back and just in awe of your stories, as I'm sure a lot here today are. Maybe as a follow-up to that, we actually have a couple questions here. One is sometimes when you breach a tough subject, the patient can get upset with you. How do you handle that? We'll start with that and then we'll jump into the next one.
That's a great one. I'll give you a quick story. I don't like to tell quick stories, or I want to tell quick stories. They're not always so quick. But one of the people that I interviewed for the book is a woman named Dia. And Diep Wynn was a personal friend of mine. Her and her husband are great friends of mine. And she was a OBGYN and just a phenomenal surgeon, great doctor. And we were talking about a number of different things during her journey. She had some non-cancerous tumors on her brain that took a while to get those diagnosed and to figure out what's going on. But really, the medical issues she was going through prevented her from continuing her practice. And it was just absolutely terrible for her because she just loved being a doctor, loved it. And her trauma, by the way, was that when she was growing up in Vietnam in the very early 70s, right before the fall of Saigon, her dad was not a great um, person. And her mom um, told him to take her around all the time so she could report back on what he was doing. And the second they get out the door, he says to her, if you talk about anything, you're going to get cancer. Don't be a cancer. Don't be a cancer. If you talk, it makes you a cancer. And so she grew up as this little girl. Everything bad that could happen is going to create, like, could you imagine? Like, her fear of cancer was just as real as anybody's being diagnosed with cancer, right? The trauma that happened was unbelievable. But in answer to your question, um, uh, her tactic was always, she told me, anytime I had to talk about something difficult, anytime that I had to broach a subject that I didn't want to broach with somebody, beginning of life, end of life, in between, she said was to lean in and to hold their hand. And I'm like, what? And she said, because I needed to connect with them. It would force me to connect with them. I didn't want to do it as an outsider. I didn't want to do it as a practitioner. I didn't want to connect with people over difficult conversations in any way that could be distant. She said, so anytime that I had to have a difficult conversation, I would lean in and say, can I hold your hand? I almost get teary-eyed thinking about it because how compassionate is that? How unbelievably connective is that? And she said it didn't do anything but allow me to connect with people about difficult things. She said, so anytime I had a difficult conversation or a difficult topic, she goes, I just would lean into the person and say, can I hold your hand? Right? Don't Might not work for everybody, absolutely worked for her. And in fact, um, uh, uh, she doesn't. We talk about in her story that she doesn't care for her patients; she cares about her patients, and what a different little tweak in mindset, right?
Wow, that's amazing. Really
Yeah.
interesting points. Um, the next question is, in your personal experience and experience with others, how do you approach talking to someone about being overweight? And I find that interesting because I was actually going to ask my own questions about your endurance journeys, and I love following you on social media and seeing every race that you tackle because it blows my mind. Like I'm trying to train for a 5K, so
Yeah.
but like I
Yeah.
admire that. And especially in recent years, some people say doctors are fat phobic. So, what are your thoughts on that kind of conversation?
Wow, that's a good one, and I hope everybody's shaking their head one way or another because who doesn't have to deal with that or something related to that? Um, uh, one day about 25 years ago, through a number of different things. So my sister got diagnosed with terminal cancer. I was in a relationship with an abusive alcoholic. I had 4-year-old twins that I needed to get to safety and me to safety. I was about 50 pounds overweight. I was a pack and a half a day smoker. I was as stressed out as somebody could be. I remember going to the grocery store, and this clerk thought it was funny, but it was funny. I've told the story 1,000 times. This was back in the days of, do you want paper or plastic? And he looked up and he saw the bags under my eyes, and he goes, "Oh, I see you brought your own bags." And he did this, and I thought that's pretty freaking hilarious. But oh, I was like at the lowest point of my life, 50 pounds overweight, smoker, and I finally just had to realize that the problem wasn't everybody else. The problem was me, right? Like, yeah, I had an abusive wife. Yeah, I had made the decision to stay in that relationship. Yeah, I was overweight, but I had made the decision to not care about my health. And yeah, I was a smoker, but I made the decision to not quit. I just kind of tweaked that thing, and I personally believe, and I could be wrong. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not anything. I personally believe that um, that people don't feel comfortable being compassionate to themselves, and I think that bad behavior or not healthy behavior or not focusing on your health even is a way to hide our inability to have compassion and caring for ourselves. It's really strange because I was really, really, really good at taking care of others, because when I grew up, um, like, anyway, I was really good at taking care of others, but I didn't have 1 ounce of concept of how to take care of myself. And when I finally got to a point in my life where I was able to look in the mirror and go, like, what does that guy think? Like, like, how can you start to care about yourself? Like, how can you be more compassionate towards yourself and learn from your mistakes and try to do better and give yourself some grace and um, have some compassion for the things that you've gone through and the bad decisions that you've made, or the not good decisions that you haven't made, or whatever. So I personally believe, when it comes to things like dealing with overweight and dealing with avoiding getting the care you need, I think I personally believe most of the time it boils down to people not allowing themselves to care about themselves, not allowing themselves to be compassionate with themselves and to deal with the things that would allow them to feel that they can take care of themselves, they can be better. And a lot of that comes with forgiveness and realizing, if you can, and it doesn't always happen in life this way, but if you can believe that your best days are ahead of you, um, then you can forgive yourself, and you can give yourself some grace and some comfort and some compassion and rechange your narrative. And I think connecting with people on that level and understanding empowering people to have some compassion can allow you to talk about these things. And I've had some lot of tough discussions with a lot of people, and just, this is just anecdotal, and the thousands of people that I've dealt with, is most of the bad behavior that we engage in, or avoiding behavior that we should engage in, it's because we don't think we're important enough to care about.
Self-care and self-compassion go a long way.
They do. If we don't care about our, and how easy it is, especially for people that are caregivers, to care about everybody around them and then not themselves. And we see it, like, man, oh man, like, I mean, right now my boss, he's like the greatest guy in the world, and I love him to death. I've known him for many, many, many years, and the things he's been through is just insane. And dude is like 80 pounds overweight. And I finally had to pull him aside, and I'm like, John, like, dude, you are so loved and you're so important and you're making such an impact in your kids' lives and all these other people. And if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to make a lot of people lonely, a lot of people lonely. And so I said, you got to start taking care of yourself. Like, you're such a good person at taking care of others. You got to start caring for yourself. And it was a hard conversation to have. But I'm like, dude, you have to care about yourself as much as you care about everybody else. And look at you. You don't. Hard. But luckily, I'm a friend and I can say that to him. Not exactly those words, but pretty close to them.
Appreciate that. Do anybody else have any questions? You want to drop in the chat box before we end?
I hope it was helpful. I appreciate your time. Um, uh, I'm an open book. But I'm pumped because I'm an author. All authors open books. But if you want to reach out, if there's anything that you didn't want to bring up, here, if there's anything that touches you and you want to continue to talk about it, absolutely. This is a passion. It's not my profession. It's just a passion. So thank you for giving me your time, and best of luck to everybody, because you're going to be doing some meaningful stuff and interacting with people in a very personal and meaningful way.
Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate your time and the stories that you share. But they're just we can't lose sight that they're stories. These are lives, and we can learn from every one of them as we reflect them back on ourselves and the choices we make for our own selves going forward and the people in our lives. So thank you very much, everyone. Happiest of holidays and the new year. And we will be back with all of you again soon. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.